could the Mariners have another move up their sleeve still?
We're going to have to queue up Coming Home by Diddy. We're going to have to queue that up on our Spotify playlist here to sync it up for when a certain Shoreline native inks his contract. We might have to. There's people in the industry saying we might have to.
The only Blake Snell info that is out there and public and reported on is that the New York Yankees have made an offer. And like, okay, sure. I'm sure the Yankees have made offers to many people, but Blake Snell is going to dominate the Mariners portion of this show today because, well, he's still a free agent. And, you know, we haven't really heard that much about what's going on with Blake Snell this offseason. It's been little whisperings here, little whisperings there, and it's been pretty stagnant. But I want to go back to our Wednesday episode and a good point Scott Braun made and reiterate at this to start this podcast episode. Like, Scott Boras's clients are essentially holding what is left of the free agent market like in a freeze right now. I'm sure they all have contract offers in front of them. I'm sure they are waiting for somebody to out-leverage somebody else and give everyone a good deal. I'm talking about Blake Snell, Cody Bellinger, and the third one that I'm forgetting right now is...
I'm going to give you two. Matt Chapman, who we just talked about.
Yeah.
And then Jordan Montgomery.
Okay. So 4 Boras guys and 4 the premier remaining free agents have not signed, have not heard many whispers at all. And they might be holding up the market, which the longer it waits, the more we think, maybe stupid, maybe not, that the Mariners might still have some opportunity if they have the space to do it.
Here's the other thing, too. It was publicly reported that the Yankees have offered Blake Snell a contract, right? That was reported by John Heyman, who, where does he get his scoops from? Directly with Scott Boras, because those guys are friends. And usually from the New York-based teams, because he's got heavy ties in New York and to both of those ball clubs. We know John Heyman doesn't have ties to the Mariners. I think half the reason he hates the Mariners is because they won't give him any sources. The Mariners in general don't leak things out. We've talked about that at length. So if there's a contract on the table out of Seattle for Blake Snell, it's not going to be public. We won't know until he actually signs it and it's announced and we get the passing bomb. So there could be a contract out for Blake Snell right now, and it's just all behind closed doors.
Well, the closest to solid reporting we will get is from Jared Carrabis. If you don't know Jared Carrabis, he is big online. He works for his podcast, which is the Baseball is Dead podcast on DraftKings. So Jared was saying something this week. Him and Dallas Braden, they're the two flagship hosts of that podcast right there. And so they were doing some free agent predictions this week. And Jared, who knows a lot of guys, right? Jared's not a reporter by any means. He doesn't break news, but he's pretty well known in baseball circles, and especially with players. He talks to a lot of people. I mean, he is a very notable person in the Major League Baseball content community. So I think he knows some people from the amount of time he spends talking about baseball. And he said something very interesting this week that wasn't direct reporting, but made it seem like the Mariners could have an offer out to Blake Snell. Let's hear what it sounded like on his podcast, because I don't think I could do it justice of the tone Jared Carrabis was using. Let's hear it.
Dallas, where do you think Snell is going, Dallas?
I had Snell. I thought about Seattle for a long time. I just don't know. Seattle. It just doesn't feel like Seattle's. It doesn't feel like they're ready to make that push or willing to make that push.
They are. So who you got, Jared? Seattle.
Wow.
That sounds confident.
They're willing to make a push. That's not the words of Seattle has extended a contract offer of market rate to Blake Snell. But that makes it sound like there's something, like they've done something. They've shown significant interest, which, again, we hoped. We really hoped. And that's the best we've heard. That's literally the best news we have heard from a non-Blake Snell camp this offseason about this potential pairing, by far. And it makes me fucking excited.
Oh, it fires me up. especially because it comes from Carabas, who, side note, I know you said maybe some of you know Carabas, maybe you don't. I'm assuming most of you listening to this podcast know who Jared Carabas is. And another side note, White Whale guest of ours. We really, really hope it happens at some point. We would love to have him on this pod. So will that into existence for us, because we're trying. But back to Blake Snell. If you are not familiar with Jared Carabas, like TJ said, he is extremely tied in with players. He has players on his pod all the time. He is straight up friends with a bunch of players. He hangs out with a bunch of guys, and he hears things from everybody. He is so connected. Now, I'm not saying he definitively has this down. I am not saying he has been directly told Blake Snell is a Mariner. That's not what we're saying. But I trust Carabas if he's putting that out on his own podcast, on Baseball is Dead, with some sort of credibility. Because again, it's not him predicting this. He's saying, oh no, they're in on this. That tells me that the Mariners still have a chance. It's not guaranteed, but they're in this thing.
And it was the wording, too, of that sequence where Dallas Braden says, I don't think Seattle is ready to / wants to make that push. And when I hear push, I feel like that means market rate for a top-tier starting pitcher. We were just worried coming into this offseason. I don't know if Jerry Dipoto wants to spend $28 to $30 million on a pitcher. Well, when Dallas Braden says, well, push, and Jared Carabas says, well, they're actually ready to make that push. Oh, so you're saying potentially $28 to $30 million, or whatever Blake Snell's current market is. Blake Snell's current market could be lower than that. And all of the teams collectively are like, no, we don't want to pay Blake Snell $30 million. He's a little too erratic for us to spend that much money, but we'll give you 24 to 25, and the Mariners are right there with them. Okay, perfect. Mariners are in on it. If that's true, that sounds great.
And I know Carabas is a funny guy and he's a big personality, and some people listening to him might be thinking to themselves, oh, well, is he just kidding? Is he messing around? I don't think he is. Again, he didn't retract his words on his own podcast saying, no, I'm just messing with everybody. He's going to be a Yankee. No, he stood by what he said. And then on Twitter, when a lot of Mariners people found this and it was like, oh, is this real? Could this really be happening? Carabas did respond to some people and he said, look, I'm not guaranteeing it, but there's validity to this. So he's doubling down, which makes me think the Mariners are still in on Blake Snell. And we know Blake Snell is still in on the Mariners, because if it's up to him, oh, he's playing in Seattle.
Man, that Mike Tirico thing was a long time ago, wasn't it?
We're talking about almost 2 months ago now.
Yeah.
Long off season.
And it has stretched out. So thanks to Scott Boras, he's given the Mariners time to think and strategize of ways to make this possible. So, Lyle, if this were to be realistic for the Mariners, given everything we've talked about for this week, so if you missed our Wednesday episode, let's give the Spark Notes version. The Mariners have capped, we're guessing, and it's reported from Ryan Divish and others, that their budget through the end of the 2024 season is somewhere between $145 and $150 million. So how do you work Blake Snell into that? If they're currently sitting at, I think the number I saw today was $118 million after the arbitration hearings and finalities today with the 7 arbitration eligible players the Mariners have. So they're sitting at about $118 million, which puts them $27 million below that mark. Blake Snell at a $28 million contract could not be signed right now because it doesn't give you flexibility throughout the season. So something would need to happen. The Mariners, I'm guessing, need to shed somewhere between $10 to $12 million to sign him and feel comfortable going into the season, whether they do it after they sign him or whether they do that before they sign him. $10 to $12 million. So that's what I project there. Is there anything I missed?
No, you hit that all pretty well. And if you want to just add on to last week's news, I would say this. If the Blake Snell stuff that Carabas is talking about is real, this Robbie Ray trade makes a lot more sense now. They had to shed some payroll. They had to get rid of an arm. They did it. And a guy that's not going to be back till late July or August.
So you shed out $50 million of future money on an arm you don't trust quite as much, especially health-wise, and you bring in one you might trust a little bit more in Blake Snell.